Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting of the Title IX Training Advisory Committee, the audio conference of that meeting. Please note for observers that this is not being video cast. It is only an audio conference. We'll be here from 1 to 3. We do have 2 members present, Krista Anderson, our co-chair, and David Halpern, our chair. And at this time, I'd like to take roll for the individuals who have called in or on the telephone. We know that Krista Anderson is here. Eve Bell, are you on the line? Rebecca Bernhardt, are you on the line? Michelle Boone, are you on the line? Donna Cornell? Erica Harrison? Florence Nokar? And Rachel Rolfe. I think we might have some kind of a glitch, so I'm going to halt proceedings at this point and go talk to our IT people. Excuse me for just a moment. We have a technical glitch, so we're going to give our IT people just a couple of minutes to get things situated. And with that, I will pause for just a few minutes and get our organization a little bit organized here. So I'll just do that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started again. The AT&T connection has been successfully made. Do I have a couple of individuals still on the line?
This is Rachel Rolfe. I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. Anybody else on the line now? Okay, we're going to go ahead and send an email out and let everybody know that the connection has been established. And then I'll take roll and begin again in just a couple of minutes when I start hearing everybody come on the line. Great. I think somebody has joined us. Who just joined us?
Erica Harrison.
Great. Thank you, Erica. Has anybody else joined us? Oh, great. Who just joined us on the line there?
Hi, this is Michelle Boone.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We're going to have some folks are just going to be calling in now. And who just joined us? Did someone just join us?
This is Eve.
Eve, great. Thank you, Eve. We're just going to get started in a couple of minutes after people have an opportunity to recall in.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm hoping that everybody that is going to be on the call is on the call. I'm going to take roll here in just a minute, so I'll give it just a few more seconds here before I start calling the roll.
Mary, I believe Donna Cornell intends to call in.
Fine, great. And Florence Nokar, I wonder if she's going to join us. Oh, good, somebody. Great, who just joined us?
This is Donna Cornell.
Great. Thank you, Donna. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes.
All right.
Okay, with that, I think I'll go ahead and reopen the meeting now that we have the AT&T connection. Thank you very much to everyone for your patience. This is the Title IX Training Advisory Committee audio conference. For those who are listening in, we do not have a video feed for this conference. It's simply a 2-hour planning meeting for the Title IX Training Advisory Committee members to get work begun in the process of getting some deliverables based on legislation passed by the 86th Texas Legislature. For the first thing I need to do is just to take roll. I just want to make sure that I have everyone who's on the line, and I'll just go ahead and call out your name, and then we'll proceed from there. I see Krista Anderson. She doesn't have to say anything because she is present in the meeting. And with that, I'll move to Eva Bell.
Here.
Thank you. Rebecca Bernhardt. Michelle Boone.
Here.
Thank you. Donna Cornell, we just heard from. David
Yep.
Halpern is also here physically, so I see him. Erica Harrison.
Here.
Great. Florence Nokar. Hey, Florence hasn't joined us yet. And Rachel Rolfe.
Here.
Great. Just a couple of quick things before we get started with the formal meeting. For those of you who are less familiar with participating in meetings via audio conference, you've already joined the call, and of course you're connected to the integrated phone system in the coordinating board's boardroom, so please be aware that any side conversations that you might have in your office will be audible to the public via the broadcast, because we are audio broadcasting our session here today. Please don't place your phone on hold. Hold music will be heard during the broadcast if you put your phone on hold. Please do, though, place your phone on mute when you're not speaking. Announce your name before speaking. And I just failed at that myself. My name is Mary Smith. I'm the ADR coordinator for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's Negotiated Rulemaking Committees. And the final thing, if you have any experience or difficult experiences with the call or during the audio conference, please do call me. My cell phone number, I think I've shared that with you already. And so just go ahead and call me on my cell phone if you have any problems reconnecting if something happens during the call. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the minutes from your October the 16th meeting, the very brief meeting that we held after the Negotiated Rulemaking Committee on Sexual Harassment and Assault, the minutes from that meeting will be forthcoming, as will these minutes for today's meeting. And so when you actually physically meet on the 8th of November, we'll have those minutes for you to consider adopting as a committee. And then finally, for those of you who are, you are also on the Negotiated Rulemaking Committee, of course, so I did want to let you know that the final rules that you are proposing will be posted in the Texas Register this Friday, but there is an issue with respect to the numbering. So there will be some replacement language on next Friday in the Texas Register. So I will be sending out a timeline for you to be aware of certain of the comment period, and during which you'll want to pay particular attention to any emails that you receive from me, because again, when we have the comment period ending, we will be drafting some recommended revisions potentially to the rules, and again, we will ask for your consensus agreement with any recommendations that we make or anything that you want to suggest aside from what we potentially propose as staff members. So with that, unless there are any questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn this meeting over to our chair and co-chair, David Halpern and Krista Anderson. And unless there are there any questions for me before I back off and let the chair and the co-chair of this committee handle the rest of the meeting?
I have one, Mary,
Yes, sir.
and that is for purposes of just clarification of our record and attendance today. Is there something we wanted at least put on the record about the attendance from our advocacy appointee?
Thank you for reminding me, David. Yes, I will be glad to talk about that. For those of you who are on this committee and who are potentially listening on this broadcast, Rebecca Bernhardt has actually resigned her position at the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. We are awaiting a potential reappointment, but it's more complicated than simply TASA responding and providing us another name. Rather, we need to get the CEO of a post-secondary institution to consider that nomination and then make a recommendation to the Commissioner of Higher Education, Harrison Keller, and that process has not yet been completed. So we right now do not have a representative from TASA on the advisory committee, but we will have one before hopefully we meet on the 8th of November. Again, we are reconciling the requirements of the membership of the committee based on Senate Bill 212 and House Bill 1735, one of which, actually it's Senate Bill 212 that requires a representative from an advocacy organization, and House Bill 1735 requires that all members be appointed by the commissioner after having been recommended by the CEO of an institution. But we do have a quorum today, so I think we can go ahead and proceed without the representative from TASA at this time.
Thank you, Mary. And you had opened up for the committee any questions that members may have, and I jumped on it. Perhaps another committee member has a question for you. Anyone? All right. Hearing no questions, then let's get started. Our goal for today is, and what we intend to complete, will be identification of the specific assignments within the charges that we, as the Training Advisory Committee, have been entrusted with, the charges to the coordinating board, specifically as it relates to Senate Bill 212 and House Bill 1735. Last week, the coordinating board distributed discussion topics It is a spreadsheet, if you will, that is a two-page document that I'm hopeful that everybody has received and reviewed. Without asking for everybody to chime in, is there any committee member who has not received a copy of the discussion topics that was, I believe, distributed last week from Mary? All right, it sounds as if everybody has received that. And the instructions that were in the email to that attachment, we're inviting committee members to review that document. Again, with thanks to Krista Anderson for putting this together. What this appears to be is a comprehensive identification of the topics that these two laws, the topics and duties that these two laws impose upon the committee and the coordinating board. Before we dive into how we will go about trying to divide up tasks, I'd like to ask and invite any member of the committee, if in review of this document you have questions or concerns, additions, or modifications to the discussion topic document. Anyone? Okay. Again, hearing no questions to that, what I'd like to suggest is that my co-chair and I have discussed ways in which we can take this pie and divide it up among the committee members so that everyone will have an opportunity and a responsibility to assist us. As I'm sure you know, Senate Bill 212 has a deadline for completion of the development of training materials that we will recommend to the coordinating board, the deadline of December 1. That is a short time frame, and it is one that does not apply to the training responsibilities that we have under 1735. Nonetheless, we think that from this meeting until our November 8th meeting, we should have ample time to flesh out materials that we can discuss and evaluate at the November 8th meeting, and still give us ample time to finalize what will be our deliverable to the coordinating board in the way of recommendations for the December 1 deadline. I'm going to ask Krista to now explain to the committee one of the two ways in which we've looked at this pie of topics and duties, and then I will discuss what I think is a second option, and we'd like to open our options up for discussion in just a couple of minutes. Krista?
Thank you, David. So this is Krista, and I wanted to propose a way of dividing out the creation and of this material by topic. So since some of these topics, and they're divided into two colors on purpose. So like the orange color is kind of the main components that would be under like the 212 requirements, and what we did was apply it to who, with respect to their role, needs to know this information. And so our responsible employees need to know everything in yellow. Our confidential employees and student advocates need to know all of this, as well as our Title IX coordinators. And so one way to divide out this material is to develop it by topic, and that way it's ready and to be plugged into whichever module it needs to with respect to the audience. So module 1 could be responsible employees and mandatory reporters. And the introduction would get plopped into that module. Module 2 could be our confidential employees and student advocates. That same introduction could get plopped into that module, et cetera. So my proposal is that we divide it out by topic areas, and then we can plug those topics into the appropriate modules.
All right, and in the alternative, and I may have shared this with the committee in an email or just in some of our discussions, I had viewed one option as laying out a complete rendition of responsibilities by category of employee, meaning there would be essentially 3 categories. Responsible employees would be the first category. The second category would include confidential employees and would also include student advocates who would provide confidential advocacy. And the third way in which to divide the various topics would be the Title IX coordinators and deputies. In my mind, I believe that Krista's suggestion is one that is likely to reduce redundancy and inconsistency insofar as there will just be one rendition for a topic. In the alternative, the topics may be slightly different for each of the types of employees, and even if there is redundancy or inconsistency, those may work to our benefit in more fully evaluating all of the responsibilities that we identify as needing to be part of our trainings. At this point, I'm going to ask y'all to follow Mary's instructions, and that is please introduce yourself and to the best you can, allow somebody to complete their thoughts as we decide which of these 2 approaches makes seems best for the committee. And if you have a third or fourth suggestion, now is the time. So with that, I'm going to open this topic up for discussion. Well, one thing I'd like to do is ask Donna Cornell, are you on the line?
I am here.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we hadn't lost the group because...
No, we're here.
All right.
Yeah, so this is Donna Cornell. I guess I would certainly vote for not having duplication. I think, training folks on things that are more than what they need, I don't think really hurts us if we try to get overly specific. I think that we're going to end up with way too many versions of our training, if I'm understanding what you're proposing. Okay.
So that sounds to me like if we're keeping track of column votes, what Donna's saying is she likes the idea that Krista has proposed, and that is by topic area, and a member of this committee would be responsible for one or more topics, and that would be the sole training proposal for that topic. That's what you're saying, correct, Donna?
Well, I have to be honest, I'm not sure I 100% understand the 2 different options, so let me start with that. But
I don't either. I don't understand either.
Okay. So my concern is that we do not try to create, 15 modules. I think that makes no sense. I think we should have, I think we've got a couple of categories of individuals we need to train, and obviously those students, like the student advocates is going to be very different than our mandatory reporters. I get that. And so obviously those are going to be different training. Some of the material will certainly be the same. But how many separate trainings are we talking about? Maybe that would be the right question to ask.
And that's a good question. I think the answer to that, and I'll let Krista speak for herself, is that as I understand our charges under these two laws, we have responsibilities to make recommendations specific to training of responsible employees as one type of training, confidential employees and student advocates as a second category or type of training, and then Title IX coordinators and deputies under a third category of training. Anybody view that differently?
This is Donna. I agree that sounds like what I was expecting when we started the call, that we're talking about three different sets of training.
Right. I think where maybe we didn't do a good job of explaining the two options is what I was suggesting is that there would be identification of all of the issues specific to responsible employees, and one or more members of the committee would accept responsibility for developing the recommended training. For example, all of the duties attendant to these two laws for responsible employees. Similarly, one or more members of the committee would assume responsibility for the duties attendant to confidential employees and student advocate training. And the third would be a training of all of those issues, or rather duties, that these laws have imposed upon Title IX coordinators and deputies. So there could be redundancy insofar as you can see on the spreadsheet, many of these topics are common to all three categories. And so I think if I confused y'all, it was in making reference to redundancy there. Krista's concept, as I understand it, is rather to identify each of the specific topics and have an individual responsible for a topic area. Krista, am I stating that correctly?
It is, yeah. So one person could be in charge of the introduction and everything that would be recommended for that portion, and they could also develop, who's a mandatory reporter. So we could assign topics to individual people on this committee, and they can be the ones in charge of developing those topic areas. And then...
This is Eve. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I understand your proposal, Krista. I just don't understand what the second one is.
I think, this is Donna, I think the proposal for the second one is you'd actually have, different groups of people developing training for that particular group, and
Gotcha.
the training wouldn't necessarily look the same
Gotcha.
on a particular subject, which I think is dangerous.
Yeah,
Just,
agreed.
I don't really see it as I don't really see it as redundancy. I just see it as potentially confusing.
This is Rachel, and I agree. I think even though it would probably be similar for a particular topic across the three groups, if different people developed it, it seems it would be better if it was identical. So I'm generally in favor of Krista's approach, with my one concern just making sure we have a plan to where the content and the expectations of like the detail and how it's developed is consistent enough so that the whole thing looks cohesive as opposed to being looked like it's cobbled together by 8 or 9 different people.
This is Michelle. I'm in agreement with everybody and on Krista's topic. I think it makes sense, too, that as long as the material is something that we can pull or, institutions can pull out and put into their own particular trainings. I mean, institutions are going to have specific things to their institution. So as long as the material can be sort of translated as needed per institution, that would be handy too.
Right.
Yeah, and this is Krista. We also confirmed that with the coordinating board that ultimately what we're going to produce and recommend to the coordinating board with all of our agreement is that this information can then be used for institutions in addition to any other content that they want to train their institution specifically on.
Okay, well, I think just not taking a vote, I don't know that a vote is necessary, but unless somebody has a strong position to the contrary, and I certainly don't, that I'm comfortable with the committee taking a topic approach, topic-specific approach to the assignment of training materials. Are we good with that? Yes?
This is Michelle, yes.
This is Erica, yes.
This is Donna, yes.
Rachel, yes.
Okay, very good. I guess the next question could be, in terms of responsibility and accountability, assigning topic areas to specific individuals makes it very clear who's accountable, each individual. Unless there is a preference to form working groups, and that would assume that there is some reason by topic to have working groups. I would suggest that we start to look at the topics and assign them in, whatever are the most coherent pieces for purposes of wrapping up our goals for today's meeting. Chris, does that make sense to you?
It does. And I would say, just to manage our expectations of what we can do between now and November 8th, I was going to propose that we have something tangible that we can have in draft form so that we can present that to our committee when we meet in person on the 8th. So that's kind of the roadmap between now and then with respect to assigning topics.
This is Rachel. I have a question before we get into assignments based on the chart. Where it notes covered above on a lot of the topics, I assume that means that there's not new content assigned to those areas. Am I reading that right?
Yes, this is Krista. When I was doing the initial analysis, I was utilizing the blue is by section, and if I noted covered above, it meant that I had a more detailed components in the yellow section that had already been noted. So that's what that is referring to.
Any other questions before I'm going to turn it over to Krista to start with some suggested assignments, or at least offer to get the ball rolling. I hear somebody about to ask a question.
Yeah, this is Donna. I have one suggestion, Krista, and this is just because I'm the open meetings lawyer here in the room. Instead of saying subcommittee assigned, I would suggest say committee member assigned.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I would suggest to the group that we do not create working groups, but feel free to contact our colleagues on the committee as necessary to discuss the issues that we're being assigned, but we're not forming any specific subgroups or working groups, which is just relevant for open meetings purposes.
Anybody disagree with that? I do not.
And I second. This is Krista.
Okay. Any other questions or suggestions before we start carving up the pie? Krista, I'm going to hand you the pie piece.
Thank you. First, it may be easier for us to look at the blue sections just because those are less developed and we can do some assignments that way. And then we can go through the yellow sections on the top portion. So with that, Chapter 3, Section 3.4 is policy on sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking, which includes the policy requirements, website homepage access, education and prevention requirements, and the biannual review of your policy. I wanted to just open it up to see if anyone had a strong inclination to want to develop that section.
So this is Donna. Sorry to ask so many questions, but so on this one where it's essentially saying we have to have a policy, we have to have it on our website, is that actually training we're developing, or isn't that just a directive that we are to ensure it has that? I'm not that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, we wanted to make sure we covered everything that we needed to train on. And so if there are components of the Section 3.4 that may need some expansion, like for instance, for Title IX coordinators, they need to understand what education and prevention is. So that might be a part to expand on within your training or within the training.
This is Eve. So, Donna, you should remember that our group of 23 people knows way more about this than the majority of Title IX coordinators. I've had people ask me, hey, so do you know anything about this Senate Bill 212? So yes, it's a directive, but we should train on it because a lot of professionals don't know anything that they're supposed to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And Eva, I think you have capsuled one of the challenges for the committee, and that is the specific charge, which is far more limited than I think what you just described, but it is not inconsistent with the overall intent and purpose of House Bill 1735. And frankly, there is not a bright line as to where we can or should stop. I personally am inclined to share Donna's view of that, and that is that we're going to presume that our post-secondary institutions have been in compliance with federal law, Title IX, up to the passage and, implementation of these two laws, but we shouldn't take for granted the fact that some of the institutions are further along. And so it would be my view that this topic would not be substantively developed as a training module, but would rather be part of a training that notifies every institution that accesses the training. These things are required by law, as opposed to specifically training on them. That's my view.
That helps, David. This is Donna. So if I was going to get this section, I'm just to make sure I understand, I would be, let's say if I was going to put it in PowerPoint slides, please note your campus has a specific policy on sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. And this is included on our webpage and has the following definitions, or maybe, I don't know.
No, I think that Krista's indicating her agreement with that as the intent of this topic area. And this is an opportunity for me to digress just briefly to add, in addition to the training materials that we substantively develop among our group, I believe we still would be assisting the coordinating board in fulfilling the legislative intent if we provided a resource list that speaks to Eva's point, and that is there are materials, if you do not have what you believe as an institution are sufficient, there are resources available in the public and private sector, and we could list them as complementary to our specific trainings. Any questions about that?
I like that idea, David. I think that'll be helpful because I do worry about, as somebody stated, those folks that are not as far along as some of us have had to be, and they're going to be looking to us to provide that guidance, and I think that'll be pretty important.
Eva, does that address, or at least is that responsive to the concern?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, Krista, I don't know that you have a volunteer yet.
Well, go ahead.
This is Donna. I'm happy to volunteer for that one.
Thank you, Donna. All right, I got you down. All right, so I'm going to skip section 3.5 because those components are covered in the yellow section. So section 3.6 are the administrative reporting requirements of our Title IX coordinators and our CEOs, et cetera. I was actually going to volunteer unless someone is wanting to do that section, but I was going to volunteer since I've been working on it in various capacities already. Does anyone have any
This
objections?
is Rachel. I was going to volunteer you, Krista, so that works well.
Okay, all right, I got myself down on that, okay. All right, so I'm going to skip 3.7, 3.8, and 3.9. So 3.10 is disciplinary process for certain violations, including rights of both parties. Is anyone able to volunteer to develop that section?
This is Michelle. I can do that.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, 3.11, student withdrawal or graduation pending disciplinary charges and request for information from another institution. Do I have a volunteer?
This is Eve. I can handle that.
Thank you, Eve. And then 3.12, trauma-informed investigation training required for peace officers.
So let me ask, what are we thinking that training would, how much is going to be required there? I'm thinking that's a directive slide.
I think so too.
Okay.
This is Eve. I can do that one since it's
Okay.
just the next one on the list. That's fine.
Thank you, Eve. And
I
then,
can do 11, 12, and 13 since
Okay.
those are in a row and they're all pretty easy.
okay.
Pretty succinct, I mean.
Well, I'm not going to let you volunteer for anything else just yet, so thank you. I'll put you down for those. All right, so I'm going to move back up to our yellow section, which is kind of the more detailed section. Do I have any volunteers to develop the introduction of the legislation?
I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, David. And then developing who is a mandatory reporter under 212.
I think that I can
Take that.
take that, yeah. And the next one as well.
Okay. Thank you, David. What are the reporting obligations for mandatory reporters and the types of conduct that is reportable?
Okay, not to dominate here, but it seems like conceptually, the first up to disclaimer, that's pretty much.
All the same?
Yeah, I
Yep.
think
Okay.
that makes sense.
That does, okay. All right, so I have David down for those. I'm moving on to prohibition of retaliation and immunities for students and employees. Can I have a new volunteer?
This is Erica. I'm happy to do that one.
Okay, thank you, Erica. And moving on to victims' rights to request not to investigate, including applicable reasons why an institution may move forward with investigating.
This is Rachel. I can do that.
Thank you, Rachel. And then confidentiality provisions for involved parties, including third-party reporters, participants, and for persons seeking guidance.
I've been working on that, and I might, and so have you, so I might
Yeah,
team up with you on that.
okay, I got it. I got us down. And then equal access and disability services for students and employees.
This is Erica. I'm happy to do that part too.
Okay, thank you, Erica. And then moving into confidential, so who is a confidential employee under 212? And I'm just gonna go ahead and bundle that with the reporting obligations of confidential employees.
I think that,
This is Rachel. Oh, okay, sorry.
well, if we're going to do the confidentiality provisions for involved parties, maybe we ought to just handle confidentiality topics.
That sounds good.
Rachel, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. Let me know how I can help.
And then where employees report and when. Do I have a volunteer for that?
This is Michelle. I can do that.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And then developing consequences for failing to report.
This is Eve. I can do that if I'm allowed to volunteer for something else at this point.
Okay, Eve, I'll let you. I just didn't want you to take too much. And then remedies, interim measures, and support services. Would someone be able to take that last section?
This is Rachel. I can do it.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. And that is, with the note that, I don't think it is anyone's intention that we're expansive of the entire state of what those resources and support services are. So yeah, just making note of that. All right, so we have divided out at least our sections and assignments, and again, I would say our charge is at least to have some draft of those topic areas for us to be able to present to each other for our November 8th meeting. And I'm not sure if it would be appropriate to maybe have a date maybe the day before, just so that we all have the content ready. So I'm looking to David to see if you have any.
Krista, I like the idea of our being in a position to share our drafts at least a day, maybe one day before, so that we all have the benefit of time to review them. Our meeting will be more efficient that way. I would like, does anybody feel differently about that? Okay. I would like to ask y'all your thoughts about how we would render our training material drafts, meaning they could be prose outlines that we just write, or they could be in the form of PowerPoint slides. Those are the two that come to mind. There may be other ways, and I'm not saying they all have to be the same, but it might be better if we had consensus on a format for the way in which we present our drafts. Krista, you want to respond first?
I'm going to vote for PowerPoint slides as a medium.
Thoughts? No?
I agree. This is Erica. I'm kind of leaning towards both. Maybe PowerPoint slides with some with an outline, if it's not too time consuming. I'm just thinking about how people consume information differently, and that could be helpful.
Would it be possible to do, like, in a PowerPoint format and add facilitation notes or suggestions in the notes section of the PowerPoint?
That's kind of what I'm thinking, yes.
Okay.
Yep, this is Rachel. I agree. That was going to be my suggestion.
Okay. Krista, have we covered all the topics for assignment?
I believe so.
Mary, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Michelle. I was just going to see, does somebody want to send out sort of a template for how we want to present the information? I mean, I get PowerPoint and outline, but something a little more specific, that way we can piece it together and flow a little bit better.
Are you suggesting a PowerPoint template to work within?
Yeah, I mean, just whatever you're wanting us to use specifically, I guess.
All right, I think that we're getting the thumbs up from Mary and Kathy Cordova, so cool. I think that perfect. What we can expect is in the next day or two or three, an update that will confirm the assignments that everybody, I don't think we have to go through them now. We've made notes, and I think we all know what we're expected to do, but we'll distribute a breakdown of the assignments along with a template that will enable all of us to put our slides into a common format. With that, Krista, let me ask you if you have any additional comments, questions, or thoughts before we ask the committee?
No, I do not.
All right. Just 1 second, please.
This is Kathy Cordova. I was going to make a suggestion that if anybody has any materials on a topic that was assigned to someone else, you might want to offer, those resources.
No, thank you, Kathy. And some folks have been able to share some institution-specific materials with Mary, and so Mary could also share out what has already been provided to the group, if that's all right.
Absolutely. This is Mary. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
One other assignment that we haven't specifically discussed is the pulling together of resource materials available. Does anyone feel like they're already, in a position to have the start to a list, or would simply be willing to put that on their plate, given the assignments we've accepted? Okay. Well, it sounds like we will just defer a decision on putting together a list. That seems to be something we can do more readily.
Yeah,
So Erica, maybe we can all kind of come on the 8th with some resources that we use, just kind of split it up where everyone kind of finds one or two.
And just bring as many as you want.
I think that's a great idea. I think the other piece that I was just thinking about is, and I'm happy to work on this, just a listing of various places where, say Title IX coordinators can go and get some specific trainings, or, advocates or confidential employees can get specific trainings. So that was something else. Potential consideration, not that we're going to develop these things from scratch, and not that we're necessarily endorsing any specific organization who does these trainings, but maybe just having a resource list in case anyone wants to use and dive deeper outside of what we're doing. So like, for instance, a listing with, and I'm not endorsing any of these, but, ATICSA or the Sexual Misconduct Institute, or I'm trying to think of others, but things like that where we can just do a listing of D. Stafford and Associates. They do a lot of Title IX trainings, things like that.
Okay, y'all, we're wrapping up. Any thoughts or questions or concerns?
This is Donna. I have a question. Just thinking about this more holistically. I know we talked about you all were, when you were making assignments, some of these are grouped together. When you send out who's gotten what, if you could at least organize and say this group is going to do the confidentiality section, which includes this, and this, I think that would be helpful, because some of this stuff overlaps. And it also seems to me that some of this could be combined and be a more, make it a little easier for the folks being trained.
Yeah.
I was a little concerned, just for example, just talking about the new legislation, SB 212, and that leaves out 1735. I mean, I'm just wondering if some combination might make, it's just something to think about.
No, that's a good point. And why don't we just expand the introduction to include 1735, and I'll just make that part of my work.
Yeah, this is Krista. Absolutely. This was a very rough draft of ideas, and we can definitely modify it before we send it back out to everybody.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for that.
And our group does have a lot of good perspective and experience, and so not that we won't be diplomatic or polite, but I think we ought to be candid with one another as we, once we receive the materials, we exchange, through questions and comments, ways in which, we can improve the final products. And I think that'll happen starting November 8th. Okay?
Great. Yep.
Anyone else? Questions or comments?
This is Krista. I do have a question. Who would be the best person or persons to send our draft materials to? Mary, would you be appropriate? Okay. So for any slides or materials you will be working on, please submit them directly to Mary by November 7th.
Why don't we say, let's try to get them to Mary by close of business November 6th so that Mary has a little time on the 7th to turn them around. I'm just trying to score points here. The only other question that I have is if everyone is planning to attend our November 8th meeting here in Austin, or if we will also make provision for committee members who may not either know until the last minute that they can't come, or already know that they would like an alternative way of connecting with us. Everybody planning to attend?
This is Donna. I'm going to be there.
Anyone not planning to attend?
This is Rachel. Is the start time 9:30? Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I'll be there.
Well, Mary, will we have the capability if someone would like to attend but cannot attend in person?
Sure, we can do this just
All right.
exactly like we're doing today.
Okay, very good. Hearing no other questions, I think it's time for me to turn this back to Mary and say thank you all for your time today and your willingness to give time moving forward.
And I do very much appreciate everyone who volunteered so quickly. I was quite impressed, so thank you so much for being such participating committee members. With that said, since Florence Nokar was not on our call today, is anyone in touch with her on a routine basis?
That, Krista, yes, I am.
Yay, that's right, because she's in here. So you might try to connect with her to find out where she might want to fit, so when we send this out, then we'll have her name on it.
Yes, I will follow up with her.
Once we get the individual recommended by TASA or another advocacy organization, then I'll be sure to let the committee members know, and then communicate with that person on what has been assigned and agreed to already. And so we can maybe assign them to be a member of a little team.
That sounds good. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, Kathy, you have anything? Anything else? Okay, we do not need to stay until 3 o'clock unless anybody wants to particularly do that. We can shut down this. Does anybody have any final questions or needs? Right now, I have taken some notes, which I will present to you again. You'll be wanting, we will put on for the final discussion, the meeting minutes from today and your meeting minutes from the 16th. And my assignments are to confirm assignments, send the template, and send any materials. And then you all will be sending your materials to me by the 6th, close of business on the 6th of November. Does that resonate with everyone?
Yep.
I hear one individual that said something.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Then I think we're adjourned. So technically then, I'll go ahead and we'll have to have David make a motion to adjourn.
Well, I will make a motion that this committee meeting be adjourned.
And
Is there a second?
Second.
Great.
All in favor?
Seconded? Who seconded?
Rachel.
Rachel, fine, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.
Great. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you.